Welcome back to the Unapologetically Relatable podcast. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Skylar.
And today we are back with another episode with you guys. I know we've said this like a million times, but we're really having a good time just recording these and sharing it with you guys. So hopefully you're enjoying it as well.
Yeah, and I'm loving like the feedback that we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, last episode we got really personal with some stuff. And I know it helped some people. So we're just appreciative that everyone's listening and liking the podcast as much as we do.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like a mini therapy session for ourselves.
It is. It's made me so I haven't done therapy this week. And I don't feel like I need it. And it kind of makes me feel good. So.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, today we are going to be going into a topic that both of us have experience with. We're going to be talking about pregnancy loss. And like I said, we both have our own experiences with it. And a lot of people do. It's a lot more common than people honestly think that it is.
Yeah, the statistic was 1 in 4
Mm-hmm.
women experience some type of pregnancy loss. And I feel like when you put that in like bigger picture, we have 4 friends in our friend group.
Yeah.
And so the fact that both of us have experienced that, it's kind of, you know, it's normal, and it's also like a sad and hard thing to deal with.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people, when they talk about pregnancy loss, tend to put like a trigger warning. I personally hate that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's not your responsibility to worry about other people's triggers, and especially with something like pregnancy loss, it's such a normal thing that we shouldn't have to like preface the conversation with like a trigger warning. I have shared my experiences on social media and I never put a trigger warning, and maybe people get upset about that. But honestly, anything could be a trigger to someone. Me having a baby could be a trigger to somebody. So I don't know, maybe people disagree, but I don't feel like it's necessary to put trigger warnings for those type of things. So
I think it's just important to have those conversations. And I think if more women spoke up, I'm not saying you have to speak up, but I know for us personally, my goodness, sorry guys, these moths are crazy, they're attacking. But anyway, for us personally, it's helped to talk about it.
Yeah,
So
I
agree.
So we're going to go ahead and just kind of share about our experiences. So do you want to go ahead and share?
Yeah. So my first time experiencing pregnancy loss was in 2013 in the fall. And me and my partner at the time had just started trying to have a baby, and I was on the IUD. I had just got off of it, and I want to say I was on that IUD for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And I got off of it and was, I would say, within a couple weeks pregnant. And then I had a miscarriage at 11 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It was this weird, like, outer body experience, I feel like. I remember being at dinner with my partner, and I just felt off. I didn't feel right. And I didn't even want to go to dinner because I felt weird that whole day.
Yeah.
But he's like, you know, you got to eat. And I'm like, okay.
You're like, good point.
Yeah. So we went to dinner, and at dinner, I want to say right as our food came, I felt this like pop. And I was like, we got to go home. Something's off. Something's weird. And it didn't necessarily hurt. It just felt weird.
It was just not right.
And I went to the bathroom there, and there was nothing. So I was like, okay, like maybe I'm like, you know, sometimes you get in your head and you think something's wrong, and really it's like nothing, almost like you make it up.
Yeah.
But I was like, can you just like get to-go boxes and I'll meet you, and like I'm gonna go to the car. As soon as like the whole way home I was cramping, and then as soon as I got in the house is kind of when the bleeding started. And I called my doctor and explained like my symptoms, and she told me like, you're probably having a miscarriage. We'll have you come in on Monday.
Isn't that kind of crazy how they they know and they're just like, well, you can wait a couple days. I mean, it is what it is because I know there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
But just the thought of that is just so crazy.
Yeah, she kind of prepped me for what I was going to like experience. She did not feel that I needed to go to the hospital because I wasn't like in excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up passing the fetus that night, and I just cried like for days.
Yeah.
I remember telling my mom, I told you obviously, and my partner has experienced the loss of a child um, before, and the child was, I want to say, 4 months old. So he has some experience with loss as well, and I couldn't really tell like how he felt, but I know for me personally, it really took a toll on me mentally. I want to say a few days before that, or it might have been like a week or so before, I remember me and you going shopping, and I bought this cute little baby blanket because I was just so excited.
Yeah.
And I thought about getting rid of that blanket because I felt like a constant reminder of like what I lost.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I ended up keeping it, and I ended up giving it to my daughter when she was a baby.
Well, that's kind of like a nice, like, in my opinion, almost like a nice reminder of like you didn't forget about that pregnancy.
Yeah.
Like it still mattered and it was still important. And I don't know, I feel like that's kind of a nice way to continue it. Like the memory, I guess.
I felt like a lot of, I don't know if shame is the right word, but like I did something wrong.
I think that's a normal feeling. Even though you 100% didn't do anything, it's like normal to feel that way, I think.
Yeah, like the type of food we ate, we went and ate seafood. Like I was craving it. I even asked my doctor and she's like, it's fine. I'm like, we shouldn't have ate seafood. Like that's why, but that's not why.
Yeah.
Or even like I love warm baths. I'm like, I probably took too hot of baths. And my partner at the time was like, no, like that's not it. Like you're overthinking it. It happens. It's okay. He was very reassuring and like there for me. But I feel like I also blamed too, like I remember going into my appointment that Monday and being like, was it my birth control? Like when I think about it, the type of IUD I was on, I wasn't having a menstrual cycle. So for 5 years, I was not menstruating. And I feel like that takes a toll on your body. They say they're not connected, but I'm like, how much science is there?
Well, the IUDs are still pretty new, so I feel like there's still a lot of research to be done on that portion of it. Like, of how it's going to affect your body for future pregnancies.
And I don't even remember if I got a period after I got that IUD out, but I know she had told me I was probably going to be very fertile. I know I was pregnant within 2 weeks of getting that IUD out.
I would be surprised if you had your period yet.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know, but
I don't remember. But then after that happened, I kind of felt incomplete and really wanted to be like pregnant again. But then I kind of took some time and was like, you know what? I don't want to like experience that again. And there's no way to like prevent it. Just because I wait a cycle doesn't mean that it won't happen again. But I thought maybe letting my body reset would help my body be more prepared to carry a full-term pregnancy. So I waited, I want to say it was like 1 to 2 cycles before I tried again. And then we found out on Valentine's Day 2014 that we were pregnant. And then I feel like I just went into a state of like panic my whole pregnancy. Like, I'm just like, am I doing everything right? And like being extra cautious and careful.
Well, I feel like with like after you experience a loss, you almost like lose that sense of feeling safe during pregnancy.
Yeah.
Which people who are pregnant for the first time and have a healthy pregnancy, I'd say after the first trimester, they feel this sense of safeness.
Yeah.
But after you've experienced a loss, that's harder to feel safe.
I will say I felt more safe in my second trimester. But there were still like moments. I felt like a brand new mom too. Like even though I had RJ when I was 18, so much time had passed. I almost forgot what it was like to be pregnant. I forgot what it's like to be a mom. So all those feelings that come with pregnancy and the side effects and things like that, I was constantly like poking my belly, like, wake up, are you moving enough? And like things like that, or like, you know, the old wives' tales, drinking orange juice and things to like get her moving, sleeping on my left side to make sure like blood is flowing and things like that. I just constantly had anxiety throughout my pregnancy. I also do appreciate, I ended up quitting my job right before we got pregnant. I think I like, it's that stage where like you had been trying, so it's a possibility you might be pregnant. I didn't know for sure because I had to wait like a couple more weeks.
You just had like a feeling.
I was like, I feel like I'm pregnant. Yeah. So I ended up quitting my job, and I was able to be home my whole pregnancy. And if I'm being honest, if all women could experience that, I think it's like an amazing thing. I felt like it helped ease my anxiety because back to me, you know, thinking I did something wrong. When I first found out I was pregnant the first time, I was a store manager for a cell phone company, and I was on my feet sometimes between 9 to 12 hours a day.
Well, and plus on top of that, that's just a stressful job in general.
Yeah, I even think there was a couple of days there that where I realized I hadn't even eaten like multiple meals throughout the day. And as you know, when you're pregnant, like you need that nutrition. I even think like water intake and stuff like that. Like when you're in that type of environment, you're just always like on go. So, you know, looking back at it now, I don't think just because like a day or two I happened to not, you know, do what I normally do, that's why I had a miscarriage. But it was kind of at the front of my mind when I got pregnant the second time. So being able to kind of be pregnant and not worry about work and stuff helps, I feel like, my anxiety.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of like my experience. Since then, obviously I went on to have a healthy pregnancy and delivery, and then I, you know, don't know what the future holds now, but I would hope my body is prepared to carry like another child in the future.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I personally have experienced 2 pregnancy losses, 2 different types. So my first pregnancy loss was the one that honestly like sticks with me the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I got pregnant in 2020, and I actually had a stillbirth with that pregnancy. So that one was a pretty tough pregnancy in general, because I would say around 10 weeks of pregnancy, 10 weeks of pregnancy, I actually started bleeding.
Yeah.
And honestly, I thought I was having a miscarriage at that point. And I went to the emergency room, and I wasn't. They saw the baby, they saw the baby's heartbeat, and everything looked fine, but I was bleeding. And they said that it was called a subchorionic hematoma. So basically just this like blood pocket in my uterus that was like bleeding. And I bled all the way from 10 weeks pregnant to almost 21 weeks pregnant, when at that point my water actually broke, and I delivered him. It was a boy, and his name was Kai. And I delivered him, but he was born so early that he couldn't survive. And that pregnancy and like labor and delivery was very difficult.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to like work through that.
Yeah. I think that's expected.
Yeah. So with that, I also kind of questioned if my IUD had something to do with it, because I had been on an IUD for 10 years prior to that. And that hemorrhage that I had, basically there was like this spot on like behind the placenta, is like the best way I can describe it, almost like a little pocket that was bleeding. And what they're thinking caused my water to break is just that because I was constantly bleeding, that it just disturbed like the amniotic sac and caused it
The water
to
to break.
break. But that was like a really difficult like pregnancy, 'cause the entire time I was just stressed out, which definitely didn't help the situation. But
There's like no way that you couldn't be stressed because
yeah,
you're constantly feeling that blood, like, and
yeah,
it's like a scary feeling because only you know what it feels like to like feel your baby,
mhm,
and you want to protect them, but it's like you can't do anything.
yeah. That's what was so difficult. And my doctors obviously knew that I was bleeding. I brought it up at every appointment, but literally every appointment I would go to, and I had a lot of appointments because I was bleeding. I think I was going every 2 weeks, just to monitor, which at that stage of pregnancy is a lot.
Yeah, it is. That's usually not, you don't go every 2 weeks until you're like almost done.
Yeah, so I was going every 2 weeks. They were checking every time I would go in, and I had this like anxiety and like panic, like the baby was like I was gonna have been miscarrying the baby, and I didn't. Um, and then right before I remember when my water broke. I actually didn't know that my water broke. I The night before, and that whole day, I remember just feeling like so tired and like achy and in pain. But I wasn't like cramping or anything like that. And then I remember cause I was like constantly going to the bathroom and like monitoring how much I was bleeding. And I remember I wasn't bleeding that much, but it just seemed different. So the next morning I called my doctor, and they wanted me to go into the emergency room because they were worried that based on what I was describing that my water had broken. So I went into the emergency room, and they ran a bunch of tests, like multiple tests to test and like make sure that it was that my water that was broken and not like some other issue. And they figured out that my water did in fact break and that I was going to lose him. So I ended up going back the next day, and that's when I delivered him. And that experience was very scary because one, I like you go through this experience of like labor and delivery, and like like I'm going to have my baby at the end of this. But for me, I knew that I wasn't. And that's what was like so difficult about it, is knowing like I have to go through this whole thing. And I remember they gave me the option of like if I didn't like they could do a DNC if I wanted to do that instead of going through the labor and delivery process.
Okay.
But for me personally, I didn't feel right about doing that.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I wanted to deliver him. I wanted to be able to hold him and just like know like it's real, even though not that it would be fake, but like you know what I
No,
mean.
you want to have that experience, and like his life mattered. Like
Yeah.
you grew life.
Yeah, and if I would have had a DNC, I wouldn't have been able to hold him. I wouldn't have been able to see him. So I opted out of doing that. And I remember going through labor, and it's like a regular labor. So I'm having like contractions. And I remember being in so much pain, and my mom, and I hadn't gotten any type of like medication at this point. And I remember my mom telling me, like, it's okay for you to get like an epidural or some type of medication. She's like, you're already going through so much pain emotionally.
Yeah, don't add
There's
more to yourself.
Yeah, she's like, there's no reason for you to have to experience like the physical pain on top of the emotional pain, like more than you have to.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a walking epidural actually. And honestly, I'm so glad that I did, because one, it did help obviously with the pain, but also because I had delivered him so early, I had issues delivering my placenta. Like it wouldn't deliver properly, and it actually caused me to lose a lot of blood. So after I delivered him, I remember holding him, and I was telling my mom like, I need you to hold him. Like I feel like I'm gonna pass out and I'm gonna drop him. So I handed him to my mom, and literally I passed out because I was losing so much blood. And they rushed me out of the the room and took me into an operating room, and they actually had to do a DNC anyways to get the placenta out. And I feel like it was good I had gotten the epidural, because they upped the epidural so that I wouldn't feel like any pain as they're doing that. And I ended up needing to have a blood transfusion because I lost so much blood during that delivery. And I remember going back and telling my mom, like, it's kind of funny now, but it wasn't obviously funny at the time. But I remember telling her that I was in like the operating room and I felt so tired, and I think it's because I was losing so much blood. And I was like, I didn't want to like close my eyes and go to sleep because I was worried they would think I was like dying or that I was like dead. And my mom was like, you didn't worry about that when you were in the room with us. You just passed out. She's like, me and Matt were just in the room. You just passed out. They just rushed you out and we're just standing there. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And I was like, that wasn't my
fault.
I was like, I literally
just passed out.
Yeah, I was like, I knew it was coming, and that's why I handed Kai to my mom, and that was like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, afterwards, that process, I remember I went home after they discharged me from the hospital. I took a week off of work, and I literally just laid on the couch for like the entire week.
Did you? So how long did you have to stay in the hospital?
Not that long. So I had him Friday night at like 5:00, and then they discharged me Saturday, like early afternoon.
Okay.
Like or maybe it was like 1 or 2, I would guess. I don't remember exactly the time, but it was Saturday. And they mostly were monitoring me, one, because I had delivered a baby. But usually you have to stay in the hospital because they have to like check the baby.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, because I had that blood transfusion, they wanted to make sure that like all my levels were like where they needed to be.
Yeah.
And it was kind of nice because in that time that we were in the hospital, they brought like one of the little baby beds in, and like Kai was able to stay in the room with us, which honestly sounds like morbid when you think about it. But at the time, I feel like I needed that time to like have with him so that I could get some sense of like closure and like start dealing with the grief.
He got to stay with you the whole time you were in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it doesn't, because if you think about when you lose like a loved one, they opt time for you to have as much time as you need before you're ready to say bye. So I'm glad that you got that whole time with him.
Yeah. So that was really helpful. And at the hospital, it was really helpful as well. I remember my doctors and nurses just being so kind and like really just making sure that they like the way they spoke to me, like it's like they understood what I was going through. And I remember them telling me that they put like a sign on my door so that as like shift changes occurred, that the new doctors and nurses knew that I had lost my baby.
Yeah.
So that way, because you're on the labor and delivery floor, so most people are happy and just had this baby and they're so excited. And so the doctors and nurses kind of try to match that energy. And I feel like for me, if a doctor or nurse would have came in and was like, oh my God, how are you doing? How's the day going? Like it would have been horrible. Yeah. So instead, because they knew instantly just by the sign on my door, they came in, they're like, hi, like, how are you feeling? Like, do you need anything? Like, they were just a lot more gentle, I guess.
Stuff. Yeah, you need that. You're going through so much.
Yeah, so that made a big difference. And then, I went home, and it took me a really long time to grieve that. And honestly, while I was still grieving that, so I had him in November. And then I wanted to give myself like they told me that I could get pregnant after my first cycle. But I wanted to give myself a little bit of time to kind of
heal.
Yeah, not only just emotionally, but I felt like my body needed time to like heal before I went through another pregnancy. So then I got pregnant again in February. And then, or around February is when I got the positive test. And then in March, I ended up experiencing a miscarriage at 8 weeks pregnant. And that was difficult again because it made me feel like my body was failing,
Yeah.
because I was like, okay, now this is the second time in a row. Like one time it's a fluke, like things happen, but now 2 times in a row. And that's not how the medical field views it. It's like you have to have 3 losses in a row for them to start testing.
Yeah.
Which I mean makes sense, but still I had that
It
second
doesn't
loss.
feel that way for you.
Yeah.
I would feel like, why is my body failing me? Especially
Mhm.
because at the time, like, we're young, like,
Yeah.
and not saying, like, I mean, they do say that age matters. So it's like we're not at that age where, you know, pregnancy is considered high risk. So,
And I feel like I'm a pretty healthy person as
Yeah.
well. So yeah, I went through a miscarriage, and honestly, I don't feel like, obviously I was sad from that experience, but I don't think it really,
like, registered
yeah, I don't think it affected me
or like
as
morphed
much.
into what you were going through with Kai.
Exactly, because I feel like I hadn't fully grieved losing Kai. And so when that happened, it all kind of just added into this one loss,
Yeah.
even though it was 2 separate events. And then I'd say I really started feeling more like myself in April.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking like around the end of December, like I hosted Thanksgiving after I had Kai, because I had him November 13th. I shouldn't have hosted Thanksgiving. And I remember my family being like, we can, like, you don't have to do that. Like, we can do it. And I was like, no, I want to do it. And of course, they're not going to fight with me. They're just like, are you sure? And I was like, yes. And now looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, let somebody else do it. And I could just have taken time to just like figure out what I needed.
Just like knowing you as a person, because I think of you as someone who is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you probably shouldn't have did it, I think it's a way to take your mind off of like the reality of what's going on.
Yeah.
And for just a little while, you don't have to be like, you know, because in my mind, the way I think is like of myself as someone who lost my baby. Like, you don't have to be Lindsay who lost her baby. You can just be Lindsay who's hosting Thanksgiving for her family.
Yeah.
And yeah, you probably should have just, you know, taken that space, but I understand why you did it.
Yeah. So I feel like really, I thought around the end of the year, I'm like, I'm feeling better. And then it was really around like my birthday, which is in April, that I really noticed that I truly was starting to feel better.
I would agree.
Like I just felt lighter, like the grief was finally like getting better. But even still, of course I felt way better in that time, but it took me, I'd say, at least a full year to like truly get over that, or not even get over it, but just feel better and feel like more like myself.
I think too, like, I remember we went out to a restaurant downtown for your birthday. I want to say it was like sushi or something. And for the first time, you actually really shared the whole thing that happened with Kai. And you had told me before, because we were, when Kai passed, we had plans the following week to hang out. And I remember checking in with you, and you hadn't texted me. And it's not like you to like not text me back. Like, even like now, like if I text you, eventually you'll text me back. Like, it's not like days, you know?
Yeah.
So, when you hadn't texted me back like the next day, I was kind of like, that's weird. And I'm an overthinker, so I automatically assume like if someone doesn't text me back, they're mad at me. Like, I don't know why I'm like that, but I'm like, why? But I'm like, okay, hold on. And then Sunday, I still hadn't heard from you. And I remember reaching out to one of our friends in our friend group, who is also your sister-in-law, and being like, hey, have you talked to Lindsay? Like, she hasn't responded to me. And I think, did you guys see each other like Thursday or maybe Friday or something?
Well, we had seen them, I don't remember, before it happened, but then I did see them Saturday night. So I think
maybe
you probably
that's
talked
what it
to
was.
her Saturday.
Yes, she said that she saw you, and I was like, okay, I'll give it some time. And so on Sunday night, I called, And immediately when I heard your voice, I knew something was wrong, and you told me, and I kind of went into shock because I'm like, how do I be there for you?
Yeah.
But I would say around your birthday is when I feel like, which I feel like it's normal. Like there's phases of grief.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for a while you were probably like in an angry phase, but without like saying that you were angry.
Yeah.
And I would say you could see like the peace on you when we went to lunch for your birthday and you shared the story with me. So I'm always like, I always tell you, like, just like proud of just how you handled that situation, and just like I strive to be like you emotionally, because I feel like you carry heavy things, but no one would like ever know. Like you're just amazing. So
Thank you.
yeah, just know like I love you, and I'm just proud of how you handled that with Kai.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very difficult. It just took a really long time to heal from that. And then because of that experience, when I did get pregnant with my daughter Kalila, I had so much anxiety my entire pregnancy, just because like you had mentioned, like around your second trimester, you started feeling more safe after
I'd
your
imagine
loss.
it was different for you.
Yeah. So for me, I never really got that sense of feeling safe, because I had lost Kai in the second trimester when you're like supposedly safe.
Yeah.
I feel like I really didn't start feeling more safe until the very end of my pregnancy, like more around 36, 37 weeks, like to the point where I knew if I have her today, she'll be okay.
Fine. Yeah.
And even then when I had her, I remember like after delivering her and thinking like, is this real?
Yeah.
Like,
well, then you go, I feel like it may be the same, because I try to look back with RJ. Like I had moments after I had him where I was like, like anxiety, but I had more anxiety with Leighton.
mm-hmm.
And I remember just being like, is she okay? Is she breathing? All these things, like just always being in a state of panic, I would say, for like the first 4 months of her life.
Yeah.
And it's a sucky like feeling, because you're not alone, because there's other people that experience it, but in the moment you feel alone. You're like, and I don't tell anyone because they're gonna think that I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm not crazy. So yeah, I definitely understand that. And I feel like I would feel the same, like probably up until the end, or even birth. That's when I would feel safe. Like, okay, she's here. But now I have all these other things now I have to worry about now that she's here. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I went through, is like I definitely felt more safe at the very end of my pregnancy, like I said, because I knew if she did come early, she'd be okay. But once she was actually born and like okay, and they checked her and everything was fine, then I felt safe.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But then you go into newborn anxiety, and that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel like Matt handled everything?
I feel like he handled it fine. I feel like a lot of times with guys, they don't feel that same connection until like the baby is further along. I feel like when I lost Kai, I do feel like that's when he really had more grief.
Effect, yeah.
Because he, like, at that point it was so far along, and he had went through a lot as well with me, because I think back on it, and I had mentioned, I was like bleeding a lot. And I remember one time I felt that I was bleeding, and I like ran to the bathroom, and I like couldn't even like make it to the toilet. Like blood just went all over the floor. I remember getting in I was like, I just need a shower. So I get in the shower, and Matt came to check on me, and like it looked like a crime scene.
Yeah. He's like, oh my God. Yeah. I can't even imagine.
And so I just feel like for him that was very difficult. Traumatic, because there's nothing he can do. And so he just was like, I'm showering, and he's just like cleaning up all this blood. And like I just feel like that whole time he didn't like say anything, but I feel like that, I'm sure that took like a toll on him. And then afterwards, just like the fact that like we lost him, I know that was difficult as well, because we had conversations of like when I knew that I was gonna deliver him, of like they said of like they gave me the option of like delivering him or doing the DNC, and I told Matt that I wanted to deliver him, like I wanted to like be able to hold him, and Matt was like not sure how he
Would
like
feel.
yeah, he was like for me he wanted me to do whatever I felt would be best, but for him he wasn't sure like if he would feel comfortable holding the baby because like he wasn't alive, or like just how he would feel in that moment, which you never really do.
Yeah.
But I do feel like that helped him as well. Like he was able to hold him and he was able to see him and just like be a part of the experience, even though it's like a sad experience.
It's important too, and I think, you have to do what feels natural for you, but there are certain moments in life that you can't like get back.
Yeah.
And I think it was important like that, and like I'm glad that he was able to have that for himself and spend that time with Kai.
Yeah, so we were able to hold him and take pictures, and so I have pictures of him and pictures of us holding him and things like that. But I feel like for Matt, he was sad, but it didn't take him as long to go through that grief as I did.
I think that's natural because
Yeah.
you physically carried him, you physically delivered him, like he was a part of you. And even after, like I think we talked about it before, like he's still a part of you even after he's gone. So I think it's like a woman thing. Like I think that's natural.
Yeah, I do remember like asking Matt like, how are you feeling? Are you doing okay? Because I feel like a lot of times when you experience pregnancy loss, everyone focuses on the woman, which makes sense. But like the man went through like a loss as well. So I remember, yes, initially, obviously everyone is asking both of us, but I did try to make sure I checked in with him afterwards. Like, how are you feeling?
Yeah,
like, are you doing okay? And yeah, I mean, when I had the miscarriage, I don't feel like that affected him as much either, but I feel like we were both in that sense of like, almost like, well, this wasn't as bad as we just experienced, so like it's okay.
Well, they're two different traumatic things, you know. A stillbirth is
not that having a miscarriage isn't traumatic, like I'm
is.
Not saying that at all. It's just
they're
for us
specifically
things, it was like a different experience.
Yeah, I think the feelings can be like almost similar, but your body, I don't know, your body I think you emotionally react differently to each version. I feel like it was a little easier for me to, I got like thinking of the healing stage. I would say I felt better when I became pregnant again. That's when I felt like, okay, like I'm doing something right. And not even just being pregnant again, but actually holding, like going full term pregnancy. That's how I kind of, I don't want to say forgave myself, because I blamed myself for a while.
I think that's normal, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's like, honestly, there's nothing you can do, but after you experience that loss, you can't help but go back and think, well, should I have done this? Is it because I did this? Like, I know I knew I shouldn't have done that, or whatever the situation is, but really it's not your fault.
Yeah. I think too, I feel like I had a pretty good support system after. Like, you were there for me. I feel like my partner was there for me. My mom was really there for me. How do you feel like support after your loss? Like, do you feel like you got everything you needed? Do you feel like you needed more? Yeah.
I feel like I did have good support from like my family and friends. Especially I feel like obviously Matt was very supportive throughout the whole time. Like, never at one point did he like give like the feeling of like, you need to get over it. I remember even in like August after I had lost him, so this was what, 9 months later, there was just like this day I just felt so sad, and I just like laid in bed and was like really upset and like crying. And I remember like Matt just like being there for me, like, and even though it had been so long, never was he like, you need to get over it.
Yeah.
Like he was just
Cool.
like,
Good job, Matt.
he was just like, it's normal like to feel that way.
It is.
And I remember even calling my mom, and she's like kind of talking through it, and I did have a lot of support, which did help, but it's just one of those things that takes a long time.
Yeah.
Or at least for me it did.
I think that that's natural.
I do think, though, one thing that's kind of crazy is the fact that pregnancy loss is so common, and yet, like, the way society, like, kind of treats you and, like, treats the situation is so, like, surreal. After I had Kai, I remember calling my boss, and she knew I was pregnant, obviously, and I told her, and I just asked her if I could take like bereavement time. I was like, I don't even know what my options are.
Right.
So I took a week off of like bereavement time, but that's like really it. Like there's no other really options in that
I didn't take
situation.
any time.
Yeah.
So I want to say it happened on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I think I took that Monday to go to my doctor's office for them to confirm that it was a miscarriage, and then I was back to work the very next day. And I remember I cried pretty much off and on that whole day, and I actually had to go to a training, so it was the worst. And I had actually just pretty much announced, and I thought about it too. I was like, is this why people tell you not to announce like in the beginning? Like, but I feel like if you want to announce your pregnancy, you should announce your pregnancy whenever you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But I had told everyone at my job. I was just so happy that I was pregnant, and then I had to go to this training, and they told everyone, and I was like, actually, I lost the baby, and then I was like, wrecked the rest of that training. I'm like, why'd you guys have to come and talk to me?
Yeah.
But it's not like it was their fault. Like they were just trying to be happy for me. But no, I did not take any time. So yeah.
I kind of hate that people. I remember I saw this girl on TikTok who announced her pregnancy very early. I don't know how far along she was, but very early. Like I'd say she had just taken a pregnancy test that within that few days. And then she ended up having a miscarriage. And I remember in her comments, people were just like, this is why you don't announce so early. This is why you should wait till you're past the first trimester. And to me, that made me really upset that people, and there were people who were like, I'm so sorry, of course.
Yeah.
But it made me upset that people were saying she should have waited, because I'm like, why? Like, just because it makes you uncomfortable that she had a loss? Like,
but it's also
normal.
like she could have also lost baby in second trimester, third trimester.
Yeah.
So I feel like you should announce when you feel good. But also people online, like, just deterring for a second. I don't get where people get off commenting such cruel things under someone's stuff. Like, I don't think, like, if I disagree with something, I see stuff online all the time where I'm just
I don't
like,
say it.
I'm not going to be like, yeah, like, what is wrong with you? Like, just keep going, keep scrolling. So, sorry to her.
Yeah, so I felt so bad that people were saying that to her, because I feel like like you said, you should announce whenever you feel right. And with me, I did announce my pregnancy with Kai, and I did actually wait. I was 16 weeks pregnant when I announced, and I actually wasn't going to announce because I just was so stressed. But my mom was like, you deserve to have some excitement about this pregnancy as well. Like, you should feel
you almost
excited.
Need it.
Yeah, so I did announce, and then when I lost him, I kind of, part of me hated that I had announced, because now I felt like I needed to share that I lost him.
Yeah.
Which I didn't have to, but for me personally, my thought was, if I don't share, people are gonna either talk about it like amongst themselves, or like people are gonna message me and ask me how I'm doing, and then I'm gonna have to share it. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So my thought was like, and I don't know, not saying I'm like so important. Everyone's like, did
no,
you hear about Lindsay?
She is important. No, people were happy for you guys when you announced your pregnancy, and I think it's natural, like when you announce something on social media, it's, you know, people are wondering like, oh, Lindsay hasn't posted about the baby, like,
Yeah.
and then they would, like, it could be like someone you rarely talk to will message you and be like, hey, just wanted to know how your pregnancy was going, and then
Yeah.
it's like now you're triggered because you're like, ah.
Yeah. So I
So
did share when I lost him, like a week after I lost him, I did share that on social media. And honestly, I'm glad that I did, because I've shared just randomly when I have like feelings of him or thoughts of him, I'll share that online. And my goal with that is mostly just so people don't feel like they're alone.
yeah.
And so that if anyone else has gone through the same thing, like they know, like, you're not alone, you're not the only one who's experienced this. And I've even like told people if they feel like they want to talk about it, they can message me even if we're not close. Just because sometimes it's nice to know that someone else has experienced the same thing that you've also experienced. Like, even though you don't want anyone else to have experienced it, it's nice to know you're not alone.
Yeah, we've talked about it before that when you kind of get to talk about shared experiences with strangers, like, it kind of helps. I know we've talked about it where I've told you, like, you should share your experience when you're ready. I really think what you went through would help a lot of people. I think the post that you did after losing Kai was beautiful, and even the stuff that you share over time when you think about him, like, I think it helps people. So
Yeah.
I'd say keep doing it.
Yeah, so I definitely do share about him online occasionally, and I'm personally very open to talk about my situation. Like, I think that's because I've never felt like I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
So now
Always a safe space.
Exactly. So now if someone asks me about it, like, am I sad? Yes. But I'm not so like emotional that I can't talk about it.
Yeah, you do really good when you're talking about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been at this point 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time. It definitely wasn't an overnight healing, but, you know, we got there.
Yeah. I think that if you are going through something like that right now, you should know that you're not alone. I would encourage you to just surround yourself with like people that genuinely love you and can help you, and don't be afraid to ask for like help and support. Even with just like everyday things, you know, like you talked about how you kind of stayed on the couch. I think that that's okay, and like that's the time like you could lean on your friends and family and your significant other if they're capable to kind of help around the house and stuff like that, so you don't have to worry about those things. I think even support groups help. I joined a support group after just like on Facebook with other moms who were in that situation during that period of time, and that helped me.
Did you talk a lot on there? Because I feel that's something I didn't do, and I feel like maybe it would have helped, but I didn't go through that.
Yeah, I would say in the beginning I did, and then eventually it just was more so of me like reading stories. I posted about my story and got a lot of support from other moms, and I feel like that helped me. And then I also did, after I had Lay, decided that I went back on that IUD for a little bit, and then I decided that like through research that like wasn't like something I needed for me. And I remember going back into that support group and a lot of moms talking about like birth control and things like that. So I just feel like the support group as a whole like helped me and gave me extra knowledge on things that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that. If it's something even deeper and you're having a hard time, I'm a big advocate for therapy.
Yeah.
And like I've mentioned in the past, it does not have to be like I have to be in therapy for X amount of sessions. Like it could just be a couple sessions for you to let it out. I promise you, you'll feel better. Even now, like I told you, I'm at a state where like I didn't have to do therapy this week because I feel like the work that me and Lindsay are doing here is like therapeutical for me. So yeah, that's just my take on it. And you're not alone. I think that's the biggest one. Like, never feel like you're alone. I think we as women could do better at talking, and I would say only if you're comfortable. But
yeah, like, not to make anyone feel like they have to talk about their experiences. Like, obviously me and Skylar feel like comfortable talking about our experiences. So if you are comfortable, I think you should, because I think it's very important for this to be a more common topic of conversation. So that when you do experience it, you know, like, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, it's normal. You just don't get those feelings of negativity, I guess, towards yourself, which, I mean, you may still have anyways, but it's still just helpful to know if you know someone. I feel like after my loss with Kai, that's when I of course I had known a couple people who had gone through a miscarriage, but I really started to, like, people were really, like, coming to me and, like, I also experienced this, or I experienced a miscarriage, like, just kind of relating to you.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that did help me is I actually found a couple Instagram pages online where they had both the people who I had followed both experienced a stillbirth. One of them was at 38 weeks, which that's just would be so incredibly difficult. And then the other one was at, I think, 20 weeks, like right around the same time I had. And they went, I don't know if they experienced it the same time I experienced it, but it was I found them around that time, and that was helpful just to see them post stuff and I guess to make me feel like I'm not being dramatic in a sense when I'm not, like, when it's a year later and I'm still sad, that I'm like, other people also experience this and are still sad.
I think also, like, if we have those conversations, like, women come together and talk and make it a normal thing, we won't have those feelings of feeling like alone, that we're being alone, or that we're being dramatic about something, because it's a norm, and you can only see change, like, if you start the conversation. So I just encourage you, even if it's as simple as doing it in your friend group, your family group, like, have those conversations so that we can just make a change, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. It's really important, and I hope that by us having this conversation, it kind of opens up the conversation for other people. And I know a lot of people online, just slowly, and I don't know if I'm noticing it more because of what I've experienced, but I feel like people are slowly starting to share more of their experiences. So it's just helpful overall.
I agree. Definitely.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This was definitely a heavy topic for sure, but a very important one. And
necessary.
We just wanted to share with you guys. So thank you guys so much for listening.
Yeah, and don't forget that you can follow us at Unapologetically Relatable on Instagram and TikTok. You can listen to our podcast on all of the big podcast outlets. So make sure you're tuning in, like, subscribe, please share, because we want to keep reaching other people. We appreciate everyone who tunes in weekly and all of the feedback that we're getting. It really does mean a lot to us. Yeah,
we're open to any feedback, so anything that you think we could do better at, or if there's just any topics that you would be really interested in us talking about,
send them in.
Yeah, just message us on Instagram, and we would definitely love to hear any feedback. So thank you again so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.